Welcome everyone for episode 4 of Waste-Free Wednesdays. I actually forgot what the scheme was called then. The weeks just seem to fly by to the next one. We thought we'd carry on with the theme of recycling and move to recycling beyond the curbside, the things that we haven't sort of covered yet. Right. So we called it recycling beyond the curbside. I think probably a more appropriate title might have been, where do I put all that random stuff in my house without putting it in the bin? Started sort of putting stuff together and researching it. It was going all over the place. Just as an overview of kind of what we're doing and we're not doing today. So within recycling beyond the curbside, there are other places things could go that you could almost call recycling. Composting is almost like recycling or reusing, isn't it? And repair would be almost a little bit like reuse more than recycling. So composting we've already done. That was in episode 2, I believe it was. And repair we will do in the future, hopefully with a guest from one of the repair cafes, or maybe somebody who can help us with some clothing repair advice as well. As textiles is such a big problem in the bin, presumably some of it's just because there's a tear, there's a button come off, something like that. So that these things are repairable. But we will cover HRCs, shops and charity shops, pass it on, which covers all sorts of things like how to sell online. I'm not going to go laborious into those details, but I'll explain the different options. Also some giving away options for free. And then finally, we'll move on to what I've called third-party schemes. I didn't really know what else to call it, really, because there's all sorts of bits and pieces by the producers themselves, as of like Terracycle, as I've already mentioned. And so there's all sorts of bits and pieces at the end there. So household recycling centres. Now, big news, obviously, recently when they had to reopen after so long and queues forming. But I think things have sort of settled down a little bit now. Not Emma's shaking her head a tiny bit.
Not on Bilford Road, unfortunately.
Yeah, some areas are get a bit worse than others.
Yeah.
Before I launch into what you can recycle at household recycling centres, did you want to say anything about how it's working at the moment in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, they are all bar Kidderminster are open now. They are still having social distancing, so they're only allowing almost one in, one out. Every other parking bay is empty to allow people to, just park safely. And what they're asking for people to do is just double check that they've got the right materials at those particular sites, because not all sites collect everything. And just to generally check the rules and about social distancing and things like that. Obviously, it has helped the fact that they've reopened and they have been incredibly busy. Like I say, things don't seem to have calmed down. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of the weather or people are still at home and still massively doing DIY. But that's the long and the short of it. So I am not aware of any plans to take off those social distancing rules. All I can tell you is textiles are not being collected at any of them either, because the merchants aren't collecting textiles. That may apply to other things, but it's worth checking on Let's Waste Less before you actually go to the HRCs.
Yes. Okay, that's good tip actually. And textile recycling, I know some of the Salvation Army banks around by me, I've noticed, have took off their tape, so they're accepting things. Charity shops, it's a bit up and down, and some are opening one place, or if they've got one of those big donation hubs, and then others aren't. We're still in that little bit of limbo at the moment. So, I mean, I think the best recommendation we can give is at the moment, just hang on to it, really.
Yeah.
It's not worth the hassle and the the risk of sort of passing things on, is it, at the moment?
Not only that, is I watched a webinar this morning, and Alan Wheeler from the Textile Recycling Association was on it. Of course, the bottom's dropped out of the textile market at the moment. And recently, I think most major textile recyclers were running out of room in their warehouses. They're only actually shipping about 20-30% of what they're collecting. And that was before the charity shops opened. So with the charity shops opening, there's going to be a massive influx into these hubs. So yeah, if you've got clothing, ideally hold on to it.
Okay, good to know. All right, so household recycling. If you want to get to the full A to Z list, because what I'm going to give you is only really a shortened version of it, the Let's Waste Less website is the place to go. Those 4 blocks across the top of the screen there are little tiles that you can click on, so you can go straight through to household recycling centres, which in brackets says tips. Tips as in the slang name for household recycling, not tips about household recycling centres, although it does have tips about them. And that will take you through to this page here, where you can see the list of recycling centres, but the one you want is to view the household recycling centre A to Z. And it's a really, really good detailed breakdown of what goes where, to the point of saying this site does take it and this site doesn't take it, when you get to more unusual things like chemical disposal and things like that. Do look it up before you go, I think, is the only good advice I can give there. Generally speaking, though, at all sites, all kinds of appliances can be accepted, from dishwashers, fridges, freezers, microwaves, vacuum cleaners and washing machines. Even car batteries could be taken as well. Obviously, they'll go to a certain place. Always ask when you go in, where do I need to put this? Now, your household recycling items, there will be places at all sites for those as well, whether it's cans, tins and aerosols, cardboard and paper, and we've got some glass and metal. Other options coming up in a moment as well. Carpets, computers and laptops. I have a note at the end about how to safely remove your data when recycling your computer and laptop. Don't just hand it over. Not that anybody is maliciously going to do anything from the site there, but you don't know where it's going to end up. And even when things have been took apart, it's remarkable how much data can be held about you, especially if you've been doing financial stuff on there. So yeah, it is important to make sure it's processed properly. Small electricals, all fine as well, even engine oil. Foil, we've mentioned, I think, pretty much in every episode, I think, in one way or another. Just a little reminder to say that aluminium foil and little foil trays aren't collected at the curbside. It's too light a material, but you can save it all up and it will go into the scrap metal option at the household recycling centre. So you can get rid of it, but it does need, that's the only thing, not full of bits of food. Gas bottles. Emma mentioned, I think, that there was issues with gas bottles turning up in curbside recycling. Obviously, the right place for it is the household recycling centre. Glass, I mentioned, household recycling that can go to the centre as well. Your green waste, you've got there. Light bulbs, only certain light bulbs can be taken, energy saving and fluorescent. I've got the name of the other one now. What's the one I'm thinking of? Halogen. There's another type of bulb I'm missing off there.
There's the incandescent bulbs.
Incandescent, yeah, the old bulbs, basically, yeah. So hopefully there's not too many of those around. I think a lot of people have switched now. Mattresses, is that right? There are places at all sites for mattresses. I've got that right, haven't I?
We used to do mattress recycling. They don't now because it was just a nightmare. So mattresses, unfortunately, it may be worth either getting, if you buy a new mattress, get the retailer to take it back, because that's what I did with Benson's when I bought a new mattress, or get a bulky waste collection, unless you have got the space to bring it into the site, but it would have to go into the rubbish, effectively, skip.
Okay, that's good to know. I have to look that up. So I know there's that one place, isn't there, in the UK? I forget where it is, that does the mattress recycling, and they've been sort of like fighting to say, look, we've got the capacity to do more. I think they've extended recently or something. Yeah,
it was a trial for us, and it just wasn't. I think it was the mess as much as anything. But yeah, we don't recycle those now.
It's a very difficult material to separate, isn't it? Yeah. You've got to have the right facility for it. Okay, good. Even little mobile phones. Obviously, there are other places you could take phones to. There's no shortage of options with phones, and somebody can get some money back on them, especially if it switches on. Like CEX on the high street will give you something for them. And there's ones where you can post it away, and as long as it turns on, you can get money for it. Paints and chemicals, do check with the site. They have to be very carefully disposed of. An empty paint pot, though, in it, that would just be okay just to go into sort of like the landfill containers, the burnable things. Plastic bottles can be recycled there as well. Printer cartridges, once again, that's another one there's lots of options for. I'll mention the Tesco printer cartridge recycling scheme later on. You could also obviously get them refilled on the high street as well. But an inkjet cartridge can be taken back to all sites. Toner cartridges, I think I've got on the next slide, which is slightly different. Rubble and soil, scrap metal we've mentioned, the foil can go into scrap metal as well. TVs and monitors, and timber and wood. All of those will be at all sites. But then there's some slightly more unusual items. Asbestos, obviously, one to watch out for. There's lots of little conditions about asbestos. I wouldn't think many people have loads of asbestos these days, but occasionally old buildings are refurbished and things are found. Please do check carefully when you're getting rid of those things. Bikes are sometimes collected by reuse organisations. Which reuse organisations pick them up, Emma?
It's Spokes at Kidderminster. Yeah, they refurbish them and sell them on, and the refurbishment's done by people learning new skills. It's an amazing organisation, actually. I've been down there, and it's huge, and there's so many bikes. So, yeah, definitely a worth a visit if you want a bike.
Very good, thank you. Chemicals and paints, mentioned you've got to be careful with those. They have to go in the chemical disposal. If it's a gloss paint, water paint can just go into landfill. But do check beforehand, because apparently people might not have capacity for the paints, so it is best to check. Plasterboard, toner cartridges also is a chemical disposal item because of what's in them. And shoes and textiles are obviously not at the moment, there's issues with that, but ordinarily all sites except Upton. Is Upton a particularly small one? I've never been to
Yeah,
Upton.
it is, and it's usually, I think it's part-time as well. It's only on certain days of the week. So yeah, it's one of our smaller sites.
Cool. So lots of options for other recycling that's not in the curbside. Now we're going to move on to other places. Now the supermarket, there isn't loads of options for recycling, and it depends on the on the individual supermarket. In years gone by, I used to really rely on a couple of large superstores, and I would take a bag of recycling along with me because I could pretty much get rid of everything to load in my recycling bin. There aren't as many of those around. I think it's true that most have trimmed back a little bit on this, just because it's just the rubbish that gets dumped up that they don't want. But batteries will always be available at a place that sells them. So supermarkets have pretty much always got them. I don't think I've ever seen a supermarket not with one at all. And of course, plastic bags, which we use a lot less than we used to, but they're still, when you've used them a few times, maybe they've got ripped, you can get them recycled. I'm going to talk about plastic wrap as well. So we've got the carrier bag recycling point on the right there. You'll notice that particular one, I think that's a Tesco one. It's probably quite old now, that picture, I think. It does say carrier bags only. And that's something that we've seen appear a little bit recently. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And then the battery recycling. Don't often see them that big, actually. They tend to go for those little Perspex tubes, don't they? So do save up your batteries and send them there. Do not put them in either the bin or the recycling at your collections at home.
However, if you are a Wychavon resident,
thank you.
Yes, you can put batteries, clothing and small electricals out on your black bin day, and the crews will put them in a cage underneath, and when they get back to the depot they'll be sorted and passed on to the reprocessors. It's because they've got a contract with a private contractor rather than it's being in-house. So there you go.
Very good, thank you. So plastic wrap. Now, there's lots of items of hard to recycle plastic wrap. And a while ago, Recycle Now changed the website slightly, a couple of years ago now, and they had a whole list of certain plastic wrap items that could go in with your carrier bags. Now, there was a whole period that went on till now, to be honest, where supermarkets clearly didn't agree with this or people didn't know about it. So if you went in and asked, and a lot of our volunteers did actually go in and ask, and they told me about it afterwards, that they'd spoken to the manager, and the manager said, absolutely not, you can't put those in there, carrier bags only. And then you started seeing this carrier bag bins saying carrier bags only. They're trying to discourage it as much as possible. I've seen some changes quite a lot now, both on the packaging and in the stores. Now, that picture on the right there, and I've seen a couple of these now in Tesco's, and that's a Tesco bin, that is. And at the bottom of the carrier bag, it says, it shows the little label that I've put a large picture of there, recycle with bags at larger stores. And it says film packaging displaying this logo can also be recycled here. So it is starting to change. And Sainsbury's on their own products will say recycle with carrier bags. So they obviously accept it at all stores, or they wouldn't have put that on there in the first place. And you generally see that on freezer food bags, bread bags, multi-pack wrap. And I'll come on to the other types that you can recycle. On the next slide, in fact, actually, I think I've said everything I wanted to on that one. Has anybody else seen any of these you can recycle your wrap here bins or signs, just out of interest? Yes.
I asked my sons, and they said if the plastic is returned to them, it's all processed to go into making their carrier bags. So
right.
it's sort of well, they've got a bin outside, but there's no notice on what it's for.
Yeah.
So I just store mine all up. So I've now got a charity bag full of plastic, but because I'm shielding, I can't get out to take it. But they're going to have a humongous amount of plastic on their doorstep as soon as I'm out.
Yeah, you're probably not the only one that's going to have to, give everything to them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we're all stockpiling unusual things at the moment, aren't we? So when we do get back to a situation where we're all going to sort of supermarkets, things like that, sort of things that can go into the carrier bag points, we were led to believe, I think certainly with the big supermarkets, your smaller supermarkets and your budget supermarkets like Aldi and Lidl don't really even do carrier bag recycling points, do they? I think I'm right in that. In Iceland, I don't think I've ever seen a carrier bag recycling point. So go with the big ones, really. I think the important ones there to remember, it's kind of like stretchy bags is the general rule of thumb, they say. The only exception to that, though, is breakfast cereal in a packets. They're never stretchy. They're more the crinkly sort. So that's the only one that doesn't quite fit the stretchy rule. But other than that, freezer bags would qualify under that. Magazine and newspaper wrappers, make sure it's not compostable, though, of course, because you don't want those going in there. What else? Bubble wrap is more unusual one. I've never got leftover bubble wrap. I've always kept it and used it for something. When we've got to post something I've sold on eBay or something like that, bubble wrap's always useful, isn't it? There's some no-nos in there. Compostable, as I've already mentioned. Crisp packets, absolutely. Film lids from trays and pots. Those crinkly wrappers from bakery when you buy the bread sometimes, or a pastry or something like that. Cling film, absolutely not. Cling film's just one of those horrible ones, isn't it? So there's some definite do's and don'ts there, but you could save alongside with your carrier bags some of those items that are definitely safe to put in. And then the other one to mention, which Emma reminded me of, I completely forgot about actually, is there is a place in Norwich called Polyprint that takes pretty much all those items, but do double check on the Let's Waste Less website. Emma's kindly put a list of what you can send to this place. Now, it's not free to send it. You do have to pay for the postage, but you could send a box and it wouldn't be that heavy. So sort of through a service like Hermes, you could probably send quite a gigantic box of the stuff, and that would only be a few quid, to be honest, to send that, if you were really dedicated and you really wanted to make sure. And at least it's going to be recycled there, because it's actually there. That's all they do. It's their business to recycle that stuff, where if you put it in a supermarket carrier point, you can't help but wonder sometimes, if they see it contaminated with stuff that they don't want, would they then just throw it, send it to landfill? So it is another option. All those details are on Let's Waste Less on the bottom of the Kerbside recycling page, but it's Polyprint they're called. Charity shops, obviously, we know charity shops are great for handing things over to. We're all waiting for them to open. I've got all sorts of bits and pieces to want to give over to them. I'm not going to go through the obvious things for charity shops because we know those ones, but there's a few towards the end. So we know clothes, shoes, DVDs, books, games and toys. Furniture, obviously, in some, but also small electricals. Now, this is a little bit of a grey area. I was going back through all the big charity shops to try and see which ones sort of say yes to small electricals. And it's quite a lot now. I think they've opened it up a little bit. And then, I might as well go to my next slide, actually, so I'm sort of jumping ahead. The electrical stores that will take electrical items, but it depends on store to store. If it's a really small one, they might not do. Some of these largest charity shops, and there are some huge ones these days. So people like Acorns, Age UK, British Heart Foundation, Cancer Research, Red Cross, they all say on the website that they can take small electricals, But I think pretty much all of them said, but it depends on the store. Clothes. Now, we talk about textiles all the time, about how we need to keep them out of the bin, about how there's better things to do with them. I've mentioned before about Oxfam and Red Cross, how they will recycle the clothes even if they are rags. So the Red Cross can turn them into emergency blankets, and the Oxfam has a really good textile recycling process. And they work with Marks and Spencer's. I think they're in partnership as well for Marks and Spencer's recycling program, which I'll come to later on. So there really is no excuse for textiles in our bins. We need to try and get rid of that altogether. Then there's the pass it on side, and that covers all sorts from selling to giving away. Some reuse organisations, which is kind of like giving it away, but they do sort of different things with it. And then community sharing, how we can sort of pass things on just within the community. Selling's so easy these days. eBay, obviously, Amazon, Gumtree, Facebook. I should have put that new one on there. What's it called? Spock, isn't it? The little app.
Yeah.
They're super easy to use these days. I couldn't believe how much easier it was to sell on eBay than when I used to sell stuff like 10 years ago. I used to drive me mad filling it in, but it's no time at all now. So you can make a decent money for your unwanted goods. You could also take them to the high street if you weren't as confident online, places like Cash Converters and CEX. There are some nice little apps that make books, DVDs selling a lot easier as well. Music Magpie, Ziffit, Momox. They will not give you much money for them. But if you want a quick and easy option and you've got loads and loads of stuff, they'll send you the labels basically, and you send it back to them. So it's quite an easy one, but don't expect to make much of it. If you want to give stuff away, we can give to Freecycle, Freegal, and Pre-Loved has quite a big free section on it. Gumtree and Facebook, still quite good for free stuff. Facebook's particularly good if you're on a neighbourhood group. You could post a picture of something and people snap it up quite quickly these days. I noticed a lot of people, certainly during lockdown on my street, have been putting things out the front of their house. And then there's some great reuse organisations, which are slightly different. So New Starts in Bromsgrove do redistribute to people in need. That's a sort of a Christian organisation, do some great work. And then the Worcester Resource Exchange, a scrap store that people can be a member for. Anyone who's a teacher will know this place because it's just a little treasure trove of bits and pieces. And they do say on the site that you can donate fabric, wood and arts and crafts materials for people.
I'm a member because obviously I use it for my theatre course, and it's amazing. It's an absolute treasure trove. So I definitely recommend it.
It's a lovely way to make sure things are getting to the people that actually want to use it as well.
And some of the stuff is bizarre as well. You wander around and you go, who would need that? But yeah, people do.
Yeah. And then if you want a full list of all the reuse organisations and the charity shops, if you go to Reuse on the Let's Waste Less website, there is a downloadable, it is a PDF, isn't it? Yeah, downloadable PDF with a massive list. And I think it's pretty comprehensive of all the different places you could donate things to in your local area. So I can thoroughly recommend that. And then community sharing. Now, there's been lovely ideas over the years and some ideas about these community sharing projects. It's a little bit like skills sharings and the libraries of things. Some have survived, some have done well. It very much depends on the person who's driving it on, and if that person's not doing it, they tend to fall apart and don't keep going. But I think what they've been replaced with is something actually much easier and more accessible, are just neighbourhood groups. And I think most of us on the call are a member of one of these in one form or another, whether it's your street Facebook group, your village Facebook group, even WhatsApp group. I know a couple of people of our volunteers have got a WhatsApp group for the area. And then more formal sort of platforms like Nextdoor, there are literally thousands and thousands of people just who are all signed up within your local area, either to get news and events, but also to share things back and forth. Has anyone got a such and such I can borrow? And people are incredibly helpful. So it just saves buying things and throwing them away again 6 months later because you've never used them. So it's good for the environment and good for the waste department of the council as well. Now, all the bits and pieces are next, which I've called third-party schemes. So all sorts of bits and pieces, and you might feel free to shout out if you see if after I've finished I've missed anything off. because there's all sorts. I want to mention Terracycle here because it's probably the most well-known of the other types of recycling. And we've mentioned Terracycle, I think, on every call again, haven't we? It's come up, it always does. And it's true across the country. If you ever get talking to someone about other types of recycling, Terracycle comes up. If you don't know what that is, it's an organisation that's been around for a very long time now, and they work with, certainly more recently, they work with companies who, sometimes for greenwash reasons, and obviously sometimes for genuine reasons, they want to make a way for people to recycle their products. And so you can have a Terracycle box, a cardboard box, and people in the area give back their packaging, and then the person who looks after that box bundles it all up, sends it away, and they can get a bit of money for a charity usually that's why people do it, is because they've got a charity and they donate to their own charity. Schools will do it as well very often too. It's a nice idea in principle, but there are some issues, which is why I've done a new slide. We've never really talked about this officially, sort of with our volunteers and obviously with the public as well. We try to talk about them. Is Terracycle a good thing or a bad thing? And arguments constantly rage about that fact. You'll generally find the councils, and I'm not just laying this at Emma's door, I've had the same conversation with partners at Suffolk, Norfolk, Cumbria. They all say similar things about the problems with Terracycle, but I'll come to that in a second. But if we look at the positives, so yes, it means manufacturers and producers are responsible. And I think that's probably the most important thing about it, is it's putting the onus back onto producers, which is going to happen anyway because of a lot of the changes in regulations about extended producer responsibility. But if you had to give one real positive for what Terracycle started many years ago, it was disrupting the system and saying, actually, you need to be responsible in some form or another for the waste that you've produced. So we've got schemes that do very well, like BIC's writing equipment one. Now schools, colleges and universities sign up to that one, and they'll take any type of writing equipment. So that's pens, but also Tipp-Ex fluid correction pens and bottles. So quite unusual things. And they'll take them back and make them into something else. Crisp packets, same. Both, I mentioned Walkers because that's the well-known one, but actually KP has a scheme as well. And KP's scheme is a little bit wider, actually, covers pretzel and popcorn packets. And there are quite a few of those signed up. I prefer the model of where there is in-store bins at a chain of shops. So, for example, contact lenses, old contact lenses and packaging can go to the Boots opticians. Now, it's a Terracycle scheme, but it's in every Boots opticians. Another one, this has got a partnership. I hadn't even heard of this one until I started looking for it. It's brand new, called Beauty Cycle. I'll come to it later on. And it's a similar idea. You take the packaging back. They'll give you a voucher as well to use on John Lewis stuff, which is a nice idea. I think that's a better model because it's more controlled. And I think people understand that it's only at the store. And that brings us on to the problem parts. The biggest problem, I'll jump down to the bottom, I suppose, really first, is that the contamination and the confusion it causes amongst the public. We know it's recyclable. We've seen it on the news. I'm going to put it into my curbside recycling bin. It's understandable that it's going to cause that kind of confusion. Going back up to the top again, it can be quite difficult to find boxes for certain things in your areas. You won't struggle for the crisp packets and the writing instruments. There's loads of those. But then you'll see one you think, oh, that's a nice idea, like the pet food pouches or what the random ones are that are on there. There's beauty products and things like that. But you can't find them in Worcestershire, for example. There's might be one if you're lucky. So that's difficult. There's also schemes come and go because producers sometimes pull out, which causes problems. There's the issue of putting a bin out and then it just gets completely contaminated. We've had very well-meaning people that we know that have done that, and they very soon regretted collecting items for Terracycle because they've just got one big messy box of rubbish. So that's a problem. I also have issues about there's no real sort of evidence, regulation and auditing. All we really know is that on their website it says, oh, and we'll turn it into this, and that's as far as it goes, really. We don't know what goes on and how closely it's regulated. So those are the pluses and the minuses. we have to talk about it because the public are already talking about it. So the important message here is, if it's a Terracycle collection thing, just make sure it goes to Terracycle. Otherwise, it goes in the bin.
There's another one, Rob, that hasn't been mentioned, and that's the recycling of inhalers for people with asthma.
I've got that at the end, thank you. Yes.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a good mention, actually. I didn't know about that one until yesterday.
No, I found that they'll take them at Morrison's, the chemist at Morrison's and Boots.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot being going out. So, there's hundreds of thousands of inhalers issued, and it needs to be promoted. That one does.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, if you're really reliant on your inhalers, you get through quite a lot in a year, don't you?
Yeah.
And there's lots of material goes on into making an inhaler. So, yeah, it was a good one. Thanks for mentioning that, Edwina. Yeah. Do shout out if you think of any other ones. I've quickly done a quick breakdown of ones that I've checked on the map that they are available in Worcestershire if people are interested. I've mentioned contact lenses. There are lots of like the Airwicky cleaning producty type ones. They're quite unusual packaging, and to be fair, you don't want them in the curbside recycling. So if there is another place, that's another option. The Colgate toothpaste and I think toothbrushes and all those related things. KPs, Nestle do like a confectionery packet one. There is a pet food packaging which is represented in Worcestershire, but I think it was smallish, 3 or 4. I would like to see someone like Pets at Home have in-store bins for something like that. I think that would work better. Pringles cans, another hygiene one sponsored by a different company, and then of course Walkers as well. So those are some of the places that are dotted around. You'll have to find out where they are though.
You can do spectacles as well as contact lenses, or you can around our way.
Yeah, I think some of the opticians have bins for recycling specs that go to the third world.
Yeah.
Good luck with them. With my glasses, they probably won't be able to see.
Good one, thank you. And then we go on to shops. I've mentioned Marks and Spencer's already. That's in partnership with Oxfam. H&M have quite a good scheme as well, where you can get a voucher when you donate clothes, and that's of any condition as well, both of those. Zara, I couldn't find much information about. I'm not sure if it's any condition. I think it is. I couldn't quite find info on that. And Primark is quite a recent one to the group of places that will take back clothes and textiles. I couldn't find an awful lot on that, I'm afraid, either.
That's new because, sorry to interrupt you, Rob,
Sorry.
I went to a CIWM thing not last Christmas before, around textile recycling, and I was sitting with some people from Primarni, and they were very keen to take back old clothes, but they won't give vouchers because they've got such small margins when they make the clothes and sell them, but at least they're taking them back.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think people are all that bothered about the voucher, to be honest. I think they just want to have a right place to put it, don't they?
Yeah, and because the market for Primarni is predominantly younger people, hopefully it's instilling a good habit. Definitely.
And another good one is electrical items. If it's tricky for you to get it to the household recycling centre, the place that sells it, now it depends on the floor size, the regulations. I think it's something like if your electrical section is over 4 meters squared. So basically the best rule of thumb is to go for someone that's an electrical specialist. So Currys is the obvious example. They will take back doesn't have to be from them, any old electrical item, and they have to arrange for its recycling by law. So that's a really good place to donate quite large things. And if you're buying something, they usually will arrange to do a swap over with your old item at the same time. So if you physically are unable to take large items, actually get the delivery drivers who'll turn up probably in twos. They can actually lift and heft it into the truck. So that's a really good option.
I don't know if Currys are free, but AO charge for recycling.
Okay.
Because I had a fridge freezer just before lockdown actually, and they charged me 25 quid to take my old fridge freezer away, which, okay, that's fine, because at the end of the day I wasn't in a position to take it to the HRC.
I guess
it might be worth checking that people do, because a lot of them do charge to take things back.
I suppose AO don't have shop floors, do they? So they don't come under the regulations, I suppose, do they?
Yeah, I don't know, but Benson's charged me to take away my mattresses as well. Sounds a great idea, but if you're on a tight budget, another sort of 20-30 quid to take your fridge away is difficult.
I think Currys can't charge by law.
That's good. I'll go to them next time.
Of their stores, which is unfortunate for Currys when everybody else can get away with it. But that's what they seem to suggest on their website.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's certainly the same with the catalogue shops that sell online. I think, like Rob says, that they haven't got the actual floor space, so they can probably charge. I think that people like Very and people like that, I know they charge for their white good taken away. Yeah.
Okay. I've mentioned disposable coffee cups before. The schemes that are trying to tackle the problem of disposable cups are growing. Pret is now along there with Costa and Starbucks. Obviously, we're still sending tons and tons of them, and at the moment it's horrendous because there's no other way to buy coffee from a shop at the moment. Although there was a study recently about reusable cups, and the scientists were saying it really doesn't make any difference in terms of transfer. So hopefully within the next few months, then we might have some large coffee shops saying actually you can use your reusable mug again.
Our local coffee shop was posting on Facebook they were back open. So I said to them, would it be possible to bring along my own cup? If I just put it down, could you fill it up for me and then I can pick it up? And they said absolutely fine.
Oh, great. Then we go on to some beauty products. Lush have been pretty good on this sort of stuff for quite a while. They still have their little black plastic pots, and they are quite insistent about their use of the black plastic pot, and they say it's actually a quite sustainable method. Now, when we talk about curbside recycling, we're always saying not black plastic, and people are moving away from using black plastic. Lush's argument, and there is some truth in it, I suppose, is that they use this same pot style for lots and lots of products, and they encourage people to bring them back. And because it's a low-grade plastic, they can very easily break it down and turn it back into the same pots again. And something to do with the makeup of the pot as well. I think they can recycle it a lot more times than you would do a normal bit of crinkly black plastic that you had maybe from a supermarket. So they're pretty good on their sustainability, but you do obviously have to take them back to them. And I think there's an offer there where you can get something for free if you bring so many back, I think. I meant to check that. And then the Body Shop are pretty good for that. The Perfume Shop also accept take-backs of bottles and things like that. John Lewis have just mentioned that's their Beauty Cycle scheme. You do have to be a member, but you can get a £5 voucher just for returning 5 items, which is quite generous, really, isn't it? When you need to get rid of those items anyway. Shoe, I hadn't heard of this one either, will offer a £5 shoe voucher for any pair of unwanted shoes. I couldn't find whether it needed to be wearable. They didn't state that on their website. So it is any unwanted pair of shoes according to the website, but don't shoot me if I've got that wrong. The £5 voucher has to be used on full price shoes, but that's still pretty good. We've mentioned Boots Opticians, lenses and packaging, and maybe for recycling your old pair of glasses, from what Nina says as well. And then, of course, the biggest shop take-back scheme is if we go down the route of deposit return and we start being able to take back our plastic bottles and all those bits and pieces. That picture is from Germany, where the deposit return schemes have been incredibly successful. The page I got that from said that they were at a 99% recycling rate for plastic bottles. That's not bad, is it?
Pretty good.
So they have been proved to work. I haven't heard anything. Emma might have done it from conferences. No, it's gone very quiet, hasn't it?
Everything's gone very quiet recently. I mean, I think there was talk about trialling it in Scotland initially. But everything's just died a death, unfortunately, the last few months for obvious reasons. Yeah. But hopefully, things might start picking up again.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we've got the added problem now of any public high touch. The risk of infection now is going to be there, which might put back these sort of schemes unless they are completely no touch. Where do you go with that? It's a tricky one.
Don't know.
There are some mail back schemes. I hadn't heard of the Dell one. Apparently, you can arrange for Dell to send you FedEx labels, and that you can send any Dell appliance or product back to them, which I thought was quite a good one. You just drop it off at a FedEx shop or arrange for FedEx to collect it, all for free. Not a Terracycle scheme, but it's the kind of scheme that you often see in Terracycle is Nescafe's pods. both Dolce Gusto and Nespresso. That can be a mail back bag, or you can drop off as well, but only in Nespresso shops. And I think
there are coffee pod recycling points in parts of Wychavon. I think there's one in Broadway in the car park. But I don't know. I can't remember the others, but they're not huge. There's not a huge amount of them, but yeah, they're in the car parks, but next to the standard Wychavon recycling banks. So look on the Wychavon website. They'll tell you where they are.
The danger with coffee pods, it's another one a little bit like the Terracycle schemes, as we've mentioned. I think the problem with coffee pods is a lot of the coffee producers are trying to find the most sustainable way to keep selling their product, which has led to some people even doing compostable. Others doing Terracycle schemes, others doing direct mail back schemes. Well, the potential there for, confusion and things getting sent to the wrong places is quite high.
Yeah.
They're annoying little things that, unfortunately, they're very good at what they do at making a nice cup of coffee, unfortunately. Tesco's cartridge recycling scheme, I can fully vouch for that one. I have done that for many years. It's my biggest income of club card points.
I'll do that.
They're brilliant. So you get a little envelope, and when you've finished, I get through quite a lot with work these days, especially working from home. Put about 3 in, and you get a really decent amount of. How many points do you get?
I've got mine all saved up because I've recently had to buy a printer with working from home and everything. So I shall send mine to Mr. Tesco.
And the great thing is it is being turned back into their cartridges that you can buy at store. So if you've bought I've got like a HP printer, and I do buy the proper cartridges because it tells me off if I try to use a cheap one, a knockoff. So I recycle the HP ones and then send them back. But then somebody else could be buying my recycled cartridge at much cheapness because they are a lot cheaper if your printer will let you use them.
My Epson will. I've bought remanufactured cartridges because I used to work in that industry, the computer consumable industry, many years ago. I've got remanufactured in mine and it's fine. Yeah, but it's an Epson and they take in tanks because obviously does your HP just have one cartridge?
Well, the black and the colour.
Black and the colour, yeah. You see, I have individual ink tanks, so when one runs out, you just replace it rather than having to replace the whole, thing like with HP. Even though I was HP product manager.
What haven't you worked at? Where haven't you worked, Emma, in the waste?
I've had a very varied career over the years, but I am old.
Nonsense. And then just to finish off, I must mention the bra recycling scheme, of course. That's Emma's baby. She's been doing that one for a while, raising money for the Worcestershire Breast Unit Haven charity at the Royal Hospital. There's information on the bank locations on Let's Waste Less. Did you want to say anything? Are you looking for more bank locations?
Yeah, we're always looking for more bank locations. Unfortunately, like anything with textiles at the moment, they have the collections have ceased, predominantly because most of the banks are in things like leisure centres, council offices and things like that. But yeah, if anybody knows of anywhere that would like a bank, once we get back up and running, I can pass it on to the company that collects them for me.
I know they collect them at the Wishing Well in Bromsgrove. They have a basket inside there.
Right.
So they just said they're donated to Africa. So,
yeah, they are. Yeah. I mean, the good thing about this is the company that takes them, SOEX, who's one of the biggest textile recyclers in the world, if they can't sell them on, they recycle them. They strip them down, take the wire out, take the material out and recycle it that way, with the normal stuff that they're shredding. So yeah, they're good.
Very good. Thank you. And then just to finish on was the one that Edwina's already mentioned, the inhalers one, which was a new one on me. And there is a long link there. I don't know if you can see it. Okay. I'll try and make it clear on the screen when we do the video as well. I checked the map and I was very surprised. Actually, there was loads and loads of pharmacies all over the place that take these. So that's a great one. Do tell people if they don't know about that.
Yeah, my dad uses them, so I'll tell him.
Oh, last slide is the tips on recycling computers. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about data because that's not our responsibility, but obviously there is a lot of sensitive data on computers. There's a lovely page I found on the Which website that will go through that. If you Google how to recycle your old computer, the Which one pretty much just comes up first. And they talk about factory resetting it first, but factory resetting will not take off all of your data, which I think probably is what most people would just do, actually, is a basic factory reset. You need some kind of extra shredding software, as they call it. Eraser is one on for Windows that will literally overwrite the information over and over again until it can't be read. But even that isn't infallible, to be honest.
Rob,
sorry, carry on.
Rob, you can take them to new starts and they clear everything off and then they recycle them and sell them. I mean, I've had one for £60 for a computer.
Oh, right.
Rob, when I got my last computer, the guy who sorts my computers out for me, he transferred everything from my old computer to my new computer and gave me the hard drive. He said, when you're sure that you've got everything on your new computer that you need, take a hammer to the hard drive.
Yeah. That is the only way, isn't it?
Yes.
If you do that, nobody's ever going to, because I had council stuff on the old one, so I was particularly kind of twitchy about making sure it wasn't couldn't be hacked, and that's what he said. Hammer on the hard drive.
Good for taking your frustrations out as well.
Oh, excellent!
Very therapeutic.
And when it comes to hammering it as well, what I read about that is it does actually need a very good hammering because the platters are really strong and they can survive quite easily. So yeah, you've really got to make sure it's broken up into proper bits, haven't you?
And then put it in your black bin and it will get melted as I recover.
Yeah. The other thing is you might be able to use your old hard drive as an external drive and plug it into a USB port on your new computer. And have an extra external drive. You just need a kind of something to put it in to convert it to that.
Nice one. Thank you. Cool. Right, so just to finish off then, so next week, we've already decided what we're going to do, haven't we? We planned ahead for once. We're going to move to food waste, which is probably the biggest topic we haven't really touched on at all yet. And Emma's going to be largely leading on that one, but I might do a little bit. We're going to look at leftovers and, sorry, what's the other half? Eating what you buy, isn't it?
Yeah, eat what you buy.
Eat what you buy.
Yeah.
So please do join us for that. Share the word, try and get anyone else to join.